One of the most curious things about Westerners is their fear of pleasure and their incapacity for indulging in it as a probable consequence of this fear. I constantly marvel at the fact that the money-wise richest nation on earth takes such dreary pleasures when it could afford much more elaborate ones. And I've been trying for a long time to sell the idea of a television show called Delight from Asia, as distinct from The Light from Asia, which would expose Westerners to some of the great and pleasurable refinements of the various cultures of Asia, and very gently twit the American public for not really knowing how to spend money. And I suppose the reason is basically that we are rather like the British in this respect, who have the same problems. It's always said that the Frenchman eats with gusto and the Britisher eats apologetically. And there's a certain feeling, you see, that you shouldn't think too much about what you're eating. French people love to talk about food, and we think that's slightly vulgar. The eating, after all, is something, a little animal, and we don't want to smack our lips too much. And unlike the Chinese and the Islamic peoples, we don't look with favor upon burping after meals, which of course in the Far East is a sign of appreciation of how good a dinner it was. We eat dutifully. True, we do like our steaks and our eggs and bacon. The only decent meal you can get crossing the country is breakfast. But we eat primarily because eating is not nutritious, it's good for you. And therefore, as Henry Miller once wrote in his essay, The Staff of Life, in the book Remember to Remember, throw anything down the hatch and swallow a dozen vitamins. If that doesn't work, see a surgeon. If that doesn't work, get a Hollywood funeral. They are the duckiest, the cutest, the sweetest funerals. Why, you can have your loved one embalmed and propped up, smoking a cigarette and reading something uplifting like the Bhagavad Gita. Cigarette guaranteed not to rot away before the lips and the buttocks. Jolly what? Oh, death, where is thy sting? Oh, brave, where thy victory? End of quote. And so I suppose there are various complex reasons in this somehow odd reluctance to enjoy life with gusto, because God may be watching, or the gods, or the fates in some way. And there's a feeling that if you're too boisterous, if you're too thoroughly enjoying yourself, someone is going to say, I'm going to make you laugh the other side of your face. And we don't want to get too far out of this. We believe that if we get too involved in pleasure, it will in some way suck us in, beguile us, make us helpless addicts to something. And therefore, we will standoffish about the whole thing. This is creating difficulties, because this attitude had some sense to it. When it was very difficult to feed and clothe and house the vast majority of human beings. When we lived in what is called an age of scarcity. Because then it was very wicked to waste any food or to waste any good materials, because it deprived people. But today, we in the United States are living in an economy of waste. I remember when I was first living in this country, my mother came to visit us and was appalled at the fact that my wife poured some milk down the drain. Couldn't you use it in some way? Couldn't you make a custard? Couldn't you do that? My wife said no. She said, if we don't keep buying milk, all the people who produce milk will be out of a job. And the more just milk is thrown away and so on, the economy thrives. It's like the man who was found in the men's toilet in a bar, and one of the fellows went in and he had a jug of beer and he was just pouring it down the toilet. He said, "What are you doing?" And the fellow replied, "I'm just tired of being a middleman." So, fact of the matter is, you see, that we are moving into a period of man's economic development, wherein through technology it is really genuinely possible to feed and clothe adequately every human being on the planet. All that we have spent in the various sovereign nations of the world on waging war since 1914, that amount of effort and treasure would have supplied everybody on Earth, I think, with a decent independent income. But you see, politicians and businessmen are not practical. They say they're hard-headed and realistic. As a matter of fact, they're very short-sighted and only look for immediate objectives. And therefore, they can't even figure on the cost of doing this as against the cost of doing that. And one of the reasons that our technology is impeded and prevented from feeding the world properly is the failure of one of our networks. It's an information network, and it's called money, about which we have the most unbelievable superstitions and psychological blocks, which have been gone into at some length by Freud, who equates our valuation of money with our attitude to excrement, and a very complicated lot of complexes grow up around that. But money and our psychological attitude to money is a major obstacle to a proper development of technology, enabling it to do what it is supposed to do, that is, to save labor and to produce goods, services, and so on adequately. So I must introduce this with a story which is entirely legendary, indeed quite apocryphal. The great banks of the world at one time got absolutely sick of the expense and security measures involved in shipping consignments of gold from one bank to another. And so they decided that all the chief banks of the world would open offices on a certain island in the South Pacific, which was balmy and comfortable. And there they would store all the gold in the world. And they put it in great subterranean vaults reached by deep elevator shafts. And then all they had to do when one bank or one country owed gold to another was to trundle it across the street. And this was very efficient. And it went on beautifully for 5 or 6 years. And then the presidents of the world banks got together and said, let's have a convention out on this island and take our wives and families. So about 7 years from the date of opening, all those presidents and their wives and families went out to this Pacific island. And they inspected the books, and everything was beautifully in order. Then the children said, "Oh, Daddy, can't we see the gold?" They said, "Of course you may see the gold." And they said to the managers, "Let's take our children down to the vaults and show them the gold." And the managers said, "Well, it's a little bit inconvenient at this time, and perhaps the children would not really be very interested. After all, it's just only old plain gold." And the president said, "Oh, no, come now. They'd be thrilled. Let's go down and see." There was further humming and hawing and delays. And finally it came out that a few years before there had been a catastrophic subterranean earthquake. And all the vaults had been swallowed up and all the gold had disappeared. But so far as the bookkeeping was concerned, everything was in perfect order. What this means then is that money is nothing but bookkeeping. It is figures.